So what's a liquidation? Well, a liquidation is very simply, it's an insolvency procedure. It's set out in the Insolvency Act 1986. There are three types of liquidation. There's solvent liquidation, which is a member's voluntary liquidation. And there is two types of insolvent liquidation. One of them is creditors' voluntary liquidation, which at least currently is by far the most common. And the other is compulsory liquidation, which is when the likes of somebody like a creditor such as HMRC petitions the court, winds up the company through that particular mechanism. But what actually is the liquidation? What does it involve? The answer is liquidation is essentially the death of the company. Very difficult for a company to come back from a liquidation and start trading again. It's extremely rare, virtually never happens. Theoretically, not completely impossible. I suppose you could say never, but it realistically simply doesn't happen. But ultimately, the liquidation procedure is a mechanism set out in the Insolvency Act. The idea behind it is that a liquidator, who is somebody independent and other than the directors of the company, is appointed as the liquidator. He or she realizes the assets and then makes payment after the costs of the liquidation to whoever is entitled to those assets after discharging any expenses, etc. In the case of a solvent liquidation, that would be the shareholders. In the case of an insolvent liquidation, that will typically be the creditors, if there's sufficient funds available to pay them. In an extreme sort of case where perhaps unexpected recoveries were made, then if the creditors are paid in full with statutory interest and so on, you could have a situation where even in an insolvent liquidation, payment was made to the shareholders. I've certainly had a case where I did make a payment to shareholders after paying creditors in full, but it tends to be pretty rare. Ultimately, that's what a liquidation is, not rocket science. It's simply a process set out in the Insolvency Act. Some people turn around to me and say, will my company be successfully liquidated? Can I be assured that the company will go into liquidation? Rest assured, if you want a company to go into liquidation, if that's what's required, or if that's what you want, if you've got a solvent liquidation, it's always possible to put a company into liquidation, even if you have to petition the court to do so.